Hi, everyone. Thanks again for joining this exciting conversation. I want to continue it with this next question. So to the alumni, what helped you keep up your motivation or drive to stick with architecture? And similarly for students, what's helping you keep up your motivation now? I think we mentioned this earlier, but some people can get stuck and paralyzed. And what helped you keep pushing on?
I think for me it was definitely the fact that I'd wanted to be an architect since I was really small, and it wasn't something that I was willing to let go of even when university was really difficult, and the first studio I ever took was really difficult. Actually, Yulia was my TA in my first year studio, and it definitely wasn't easy, but I figured if I managed to get through first year and actually graduate, I felt like I should do my due diligence and go to the next step, whatever the next step was.
Yeah, I think for me I was really motivated to become a licensed architect. That was incredibly important to me, and so I think that was what, like I mentioned before, kept me motivated and within the profession. Because what's nice is that the ARE and the hours you're supposed to get for that. Is it AXP now? It was called IDP when I was doing it, but is it AXP, the experience?
I think so.
So it's nice because it's a set of guidelines. It's like a framework that you're like, okay, here are the things that I need to hit in order to be able to get this experience, and then in order for me to be able to get my license. And it was kind of like a nice bounded framework to say, this is what's going to keep me motivated, trying to get and hit all of these different areas of the experience that I need. So for me, I found that really helpful because my whole thing was I need to be licensed, and I want to do it as soon as possible. So I ended up getting licensed. I graduated in 2008. I got licensed in 2012. And in New York, you have to have 3 years of experience. So I done with my test before then, but because I had some lags in experience from the recession, it took me a little bit longer. But really, I did it as soon as possible. So that was my main motivation, was getting that experience and becoming licensed.
Why was being licensed so special to you?
Because I think not a lot of women are licensed. So there was that. I think you're not allowed to legally call yourself an architect unless you're licensed. Many people do, but really you're not allowed to. And somehow for me, I was like, you know what? No, I want to be able to really legally call myself an architect. That's really important to me. And so for me, it was like a credential, like being, a lawyer and a doctor. You have to take an exam and get licensed in that in order to be able to practice it. And so I felt that it legitimized my career path for me. I wanted to be able to sign and seal documents and say yeah, I did this. I don't need anybody else to do this work as an architect. I can do it on my own if I wanted to. And so now I've started my own design build practice with my partner, and I can do that, and it's great. And I just feel more confident in calling myself an architect because I have that license. And I think that's something for me would have been missing if I didn't get that license.
It's definitely well put. Yeah.
That's great. Danny, I totally relate to you when you said your first year of architecture was really stressful and hard because unlike you, I decided to do architecture maybe 3 years before I applied to school. I was actually in high school of fashion industries for fashion design, and I saw my life going a whole different way. And I was always around the male figures in my family, and they were engineers and contractors and this and that. I said, you know what, I really want to get into this field. And when I got into City College, I kind of entered into a whole new language, and architecture is kind of like a whole new language, and it was scary. I wanted to drop so many times. But my first year professor, Professor Collins, I remember this conversation. I went to him and I was almost to tears, and I was I can't do this anymore. And he was like, if you love it and you're stressed, then keep going. But if you hate it and you just don't like the field and you can't do it anymore, then you should drop. And then I really looked at myself and I said, it's not architecture that I don't hate. It's really just the stress of school. So he kind of really helped me to push forward. And Yeah, so I would say to keep me motivated to talk to your professors and talk to these architects in the field so that they can really give you um, life lessons, because believe it or not, like a lot of architects that I talk to now, they've all wanted to drop when they were in school. And they really like believe that the education route of coming to architecture was harder than the career in terms of like
Definitely.
the struggles in life. Yeah.
Collins is a good one. I took him for third year when they used to have the Wednesday, Saturday classes. And I liked that he definitely treated us all like adults. I mean, we were adults at that point. But the advice that he gave you is basically like a guideline of basically you can do whatever you want, but that idea of like self-reflection as opposed to just staying the course, I think, you know, or just do the work or something like that. You know, professors have the ability to be either really disparaging or very encouraging. I was encouraged to pursue interior design in
Ugh.
first year and just drop architecture altogether. And, you know, I think everybody's experience in their profession is different. I think I gravitated more towards professors who were practicing and were architects in every sense of like the name, the license, the whole thing. And I felt like in my experience, the ones that were practicing and had gone the course of going through the AREs, or I've forgotten what they're called. I don't know if they've changed them at this point, but the professors that had gone through it were actually, they were able to give you a different purview. When I went to drop architecture, it was actually an art professor when I wanted to like go across to like the Goethals building, the Compton Goethals building, to sign up for like fine art or something. And it was, I don't know his name still to this day, but he told me to take a month and figure it out and figure out like try SketchUp and see if I still wanted to drop. I never got to tell him thank you, but because of what he told me, I didn't drop. And it was really helpful. And you know, those same people can help you in your search and in anything else. Like there's still professors I still speak to. Yeah.
So wait, what year did you want to drop?
2006, 2007, 2009. Yeah, I mean, I think to Yulia's point before, like your friends in school eventually become your colleagues, and you know, the support system, because whether you end up in different firms or not, you know, it's those people that will like encourage you when you feel like your model's absolute like um rubbish, you know, in school, that will still be the people that you can call when you're looking for new opportunities and things like that. So that, I mean, my friends at the time, most of us still speak, and some of them I work with now. They're still the people you can bounce ideas off of because they know where you're coming from. And they'll also be the people that will be like, you've been here all day, have you eaten? You know, those people that show a level of care to you, or if you need to borrow some basswood.
And Gabriella, to your question of why the license, I think in terms of your job search, it also makes you more marketable to an employer. If you can tell them, this is where I am in my AXP, right? I got that right? The experience, thank you. In my AXP. And you know, I am planning to start taking my exams at this time. Like, it's a level of seriousness that I think not all architecture students or young architects have. And so it makes you stand out. It's impressive. It means that you're serious about what you're doing, that you want to get that credential. So I think that's another thing just to think about as you're beginning, you know, your life as a professional.
You're definitely seen as an investment, because no company, I mean, the process of hiring anybody for any company is quite an expensive one. So if they know that, or they feel like you're going to have some level of like gratitude and also like what's the word, loyalty to a company, and that, you know, eventually you can move from being a project designer to a PA to, you know, up and up and up, that's something that they will seek out. And to Julia's point before about, using this matrix, like focusing on the matrix and the checkpoints of what the experience is, it's definitely a better use of your time than sort of going around like a rudderless ship.
Okay, so you guys mentioned, especially Julia, you mentioned the AREs, and I think that can take us into a new direction as far as what are the alternatives to directly working in architecture, because obviously right now we cannot for most of us. I personally got laid off because I don't have, a remote connection. So I think right now a lot of us are wondering, for people whose internships were canceled or they really don't know how to reach out to people, what are some alternatives to make sure you still have a foothold in architecture? But you can do them on your own time. So you mentioned the AREs or grad school. Like, did you guys think of any alternatives? And for students, do you guys have any alternatives that you're thinking about that you might want to ask about, or such as competitions or getting certified? There's a lot of different things that we can do, but it's kind of hard to gauge that out. So I'd love to hear you guys' perspectives on that.
Sorry, were you directing that towards current students or the alumni?
To both. So I want to get your perspective on what you guys did as alternatives while you were dealing with the recession and how to keep your leg or your foot in architecture. And for students, like, what are the alternatives that you're thinking about, or things that you're questioning as far as how to stay relevant in the world of architecture?
For me, I applied to Jacobs Engineering out of school. It was one of the places I applied to. It's an engineering firm with a very small, like GBNA was a very, very, very small architecture group. In terms of like scale, let's say there's 1,000 engineers and there were like 30 odd of us as architects. So you're a small fish in a big pond. And how I even got that job was like that winter or fall before, anybody I would meet, I would just tell them what I was about. Not like an elevator pitch, but like they'd ask how I was. I'm looking for a job. That's how I am, and I'm about to graduate. I let everybody know that I was on the hunt. And it so happened that like through 5 different chains of connection, my friend was the tutor for a kid whose mother worked in the legal department of Jacobs Engineering. And so she was like, there's an opening. We've got like this big project coming along. You might want to just like send me your resume. And that's how it happened. And at that point, like I was also working at the Pancake Palace, and I'd moved back into my parents' house in New Jersey. And I was also about to get married in the September. So there was a lot of like pressure, but I was also open to like being that pancake princess or what have you, like if I needed to be. But anyway, I got the interview at Jacobs Engineering, and I made it my business to get that job. And so like the soft skills that I was talking about before, like I had my bits and my pieces and the hard skills all on my resume, but like if they're asking you to come in, they already know what you're able to do in terms of your hard skills. And my interview ended up turning into like a 2-hour conversation with the hiring manager at the time. And I think that really stood out. Before, as I mentioned, I was working in an expediting firm, and like understanding code and understanding like the process of permitting and things like that definitely helped. So I would say that it's these 3 things: letting everybody know that you're looking, being willing to go into a non-traditional firm, because like those engineering AXP credits that are harder to come by, with like coordination and collaboration. At Jacobs was where I was able to do like that part D. At the time, it was part D of the IDP. And also like volunteering and stuff like that, because it's a different realm than trying to be being in a firm. Also, to the people who are going in now, I think that there's going to be an influx, or there's going to be a strong desire for people to gain new work and business development when things, recalibrate. So I would say if you're not strong on like visualization stuff now, those are things that you can do in the meantime with like free tools and things like that. CATIA is a word that I don't know what it is, but I know that it's a visualization tool, and it's something that a lot of the firms that would be going after those bigger competitions and like wanting to win them would be looking for. And in the meantime, the other skills that kind of cross boundaries of like design and graphics and things like that. Photography, for one, is a great thing to have. There'll also be a lot of people whose weddings were postponed and might like, maybe you can act as a photographer's assistant, or even like helping them with the layouts for what are they called? Not photograph books, photography books, or, you know, albums, sorry, things like that. Graphic resources. You might find yourself in positions where there's such a volume of work that people are going to need help. If you have Illustrator, if you have all of those things, if you're able to do things in a timely manner and well, those will be the things that are going to be picked up first. So I would say learn as much as you can during this time.
I really appreciate that advice, because in the beginning of this pandemic, I kind of was starting to become paralyzed, because I was like unmotivated. Like Gabriella said, I was now at a place that I was once relaxed at, and now I have to make that place my workstation. And it's kind of crazy dealing with your family and school, because they don't get that architecture school is intense and that you do need to be alone and just work sometimes. And so like I really had to just write in my planner and time myself. Like I have to get this done in a time frame of 3 to 5 p.m. and I have to then look at videos to help me edit this and edit that. And so I've been trying to just keep a schedule to help me like stay motivated.
That is like so on point. I'm actually speaking to you from inside of a closet because it was the only quiet place I could find. But yeah, like just revamping your workspaces. Like, you know, I never know. I'm like nervous that somebody's going to bust in through the door and ask for a snack and things like that. It's just been very different. And, you know, most employers are willing to be flexible as people navigate that. But I also think that this has changed the way in which we work. If you can be given a task and do it efficiently, you will be the point person for, you know, your future or current employers.
Speaking about that, I remember one time, I think it was like 2 weeks ago, I had a Zoom call with my professor and I had to do it in the bathroom because I couldn't find another quiet place. And then like literally as soon as I got in there, someone barged in and was like, "Hey, can I use the bathroom?" And I was like, I hope you didn't hear that.
But listen, what counts is that you were available for the Zoom call. Like whatever you have to do at this point is just that, you know?
Yeah. I feel like also like it's been kind of fun how like everything's on a Zoom call. Like you can easily just like put on a nice shirt and boom, you're professional. Like I don't know. I don't know. I just want to say also I had to like completely rearrange my room because I realized like my house only has one desk and my brother, he just uses it all the time. And since I don't have a desk, I'm like working on my bed and then I just end up falling asleep. So I had to go and make a desk. Like I got my night table and luckily I bought this chair from the thrift store right before everything happened. So I have a chair and I have my night table and then I could do work. But for the first like 2 weeks, I was like, why am I falling asleep all day?
Probably because you're tired. I mean, I think also this has been a really interesting time for people who create space to be forced to create space of what they originally have. Like most people are not able to just go on like Office Depot and order an entire setup. So I think it's going to change the way in which we design as well, and the way that we think through space, and the way that, you know, like those little nooks and crannies where when you're trying to plot out somebody's future home or like a future business, how all of those spaces can be used, closets and bathrooms and, you know, all of those things included. How do we create spaces that are functional and flexible?
Yeah, I also feel like definitely like how do you make sure that study areas are like a lot of people have study rooms and like I've realized like the study room that's in my house is very weird. And now like because I have to actually like study in there and now that I'm trying to make my own study spot, I'm realizing how important the window is positioned in the room. Because if it's in the wrong spot, it's just annoying.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're working at 1-to-1 scale now. You don't. figure it out in your own home. Mm-hmm. One other way I think that you all can build skills is by volunteering for various organizations. I know I volunteer with the AIA, Danny does as well. That's an incredible professional network. The New York chapter has a ton of committees that you can literally just attend the meeting. Now the meetings are virtual. You can still attend. It's many professionals are on all of these different committees. So I'm on the Design for Risk and Reconstruction Committee, which was formed right around the time Hurricane Sandy happened in 2012. So it looks at resilience in both environments, particularly important now. And I've met some incredible people through that connection. And I decided to join that committee because I wanted to kind of follow this interest that I had around how to rebuild after a disaster. And I was like, well, where can I do that and combine that with being an architect? And so I found that committee, and like I've made some great relationships from that. I met a woman who her name is Sarah. She works for an organization called Archive Global, which is a nonprofit that works at the intersection of public health and the built environment. And she and I have started to collaborate on projects together, still in a volunteer capacity, but I'm able to explore my interests through that connection, and kind of, have something else to talk about when I'm looking, when I'm meeting people, when I'm going to apply for jobs. Like now I have this other interest that differentiates me. Like Danny was saying, like, I'm interested in this particular type of work. And like, okay, well, how have you explored that? Well, I've done this, this, and this. So there's all these opportunities that you could, if you have the time, and obviously much better to have a paid job, but in the interim, you could also volunteer your time, and really any volunteer effort, all they want is somebody who's motivated and has the time and is willing to commit it kind of week after week on a consistent basis.
Definitely. And I think the other part of volunteering as well is even when you've gotten your job, right, and you're not in school anymore, I feel like there are a lot of people who don't really interact in anything beyond work, and then they just sort of go home. And I think as a person who is tasked with the responsibility of having to make something out of nothing, it's really important for us to stay inspired and to stay active and present in what we're doing. It used to be that you could just, walk around for an hour in a museum, but now, like, most museums have gone virtual. Maybe in between you can have a cup of coffee or, water or what have you, and just like tour a museum that you otherwise wouldn't have been able to go to. Volunteering as a working professional does that same sort of thing. Like, you're able to have more collisions with more people that otherwise you just wouldn't have.
Yep.
And most of the time, inspiration is not hiding under your desk at your workplace. If it's a tough day there and, maybe things didn't go 100% the way that you wanted it to, you might be able to learn something in your volunteer capacity that you can then bring to the table and better navigate what your work life is.
Yeah, and the volunteer work allows you to work on potentially interesting projects that can also go on your resume that then you can talk about in an interview. So it's not like it's work that exists somewhere that's never visible to like your employer. Yeah, it's just as relevant and important, I think, as your professional practice, because it's an extension of it.
Exactly.
I just really want to thank you guys for this conversation. I think a big part of me has gotten a little bit paralyzed from this, and I think a lot of people have, because it's pretty scary to not only this pandemic, but the idea that, the path that we've envisioned for ourselves kind of stopped or has irrevocably changed. And, hearing about these different opportunities, at first it scared me a bit, because it's like, this was my plan. I'm with you, Yulia. Like, I wanted to be a licensed architect immediately. So my plan was, toward that. And I think this has changed everything, but also given a lot of people, including myself, a great opportunity to explore the things that we didn't think we had time to. And, especially things that are relevant to architecture. So I really appreciate you guys coming and speaking about this. I think it's pretty inspiring to me, and I hope to all of our listeners. So before we end this, do you guys have any last words? Do you have any advice or opportunities or things you just want to share with our listeners and with each other?
I've done a part one of, we do, so Wallen and Dub, like through Wallen and Dub, I do these things called 9 nodes, and essentially it's like a vignette of an idea or a place or something of interest to design or architecture professionals and creatives. I recently did one about like graduating now and what students should be looking out for, and like advice from people who graduated during the Great Recession. Between 2008 and 2010. So my friends and I asked them, like, what if you could just like put it on a post-it, what would your piece of advice be? And it's up on the website and also on our Instagram for Wall and Dog. And I'm hoping that it will be useful to people like yourselves. And if not, then share it, weigh in, talk about it. But it was just our idea of what worked for us, what didn't work for us, and next steps going forward. We've done the part one, the part two is coming up, and I think that everything I've learned in this conversation, which I'm really grateful you had me to be a part of, I'm hoping it will be useful to folks. But I think that the underlying thing is to like keep going. It's fine if you're really feeling it, and you're empathetic to the fact that this global pandemic has changed a lot, and there might be a sense of disappointment or loss that goes with it. And I'm hoping that on the other side of that, like, we can really like work through it, however it is that we work through it. But being proactive does help. Like, we're not going to solve everything in one go, but if you keep moving and putting one step in front of the other, that definitely does help to get to a solution, whatever that is. It's just this fear of the unknown, and that's totally understandable.
Yeah, I would say to really stay connected to each other, because you will be each other's biggest supporters and sources of future work. Because even if it's not the person that you know right now, it's going to be who that person knows, a year from now, or they met somebody who met somebody, and it comes back to you. So really staying connected to one another and maintaining those close ties, I think, is incredibly important. The group of graduates from my year, there's a large group of us who we're still in touch all the time, 12 years later. They're some of my closest friends, and I don't know where I would be without them. And we really supported each other through time. And so there's like one person, I think one of my friends who's now actually a business partner, I think I had like 3 jobs I got through him, which is crazy. How do I get through 3 jobs through one person? And so stay connected to one another. I would say that would be my biggest piece of advice. Sorry, my cat is going crazy if you hear that in the background.
He has thoughts and ideas that he wants to share, or she.
Yeah, she's like, I'm tired of being at home. I'm tired of you being at home. The other thing that I would say is that, this moment is unique. And it's difficult, and it will be, a difficult few months or a year, but it will pass and you'll come to the other side of it. And if you set goals for yourself and you don't get to where you want to get in that time, it's okay, right? It's okay. I have, during the 2008 recession, I had friends that went and did retail jobs because they needed to be able to support themselves, and that's the only way that they were going to do it. And that's okay. Like, if you don't end up working in architecture, that's okay. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't use that as like something that you hold against yourself, because the time will pass and you'll get back to it. And like, I've had friends that have had myriad different experiences, and now 12 years later, we are all practicing architecture in our own ways. Some people are construction managers, some people run their own businesses, some people work for big firms, for small firms, and have, but many of us are really still within the profession, working in different capacities, even though we took different paths to get there.
And resilience is a really admirable trait. I think, whatever you learn, whatever propels you to go forward and, progress, I think you just have to be kinder to ourselves.
Yeah. And I think we as alums, we are here for you, right? We're resources for you. I'm happy to talk to anyone at any time. And kind of, if you or your listeners are looking for someone that can help kind of be a sounding board for what they're thinking, you know, I'm on the alumni board, and all of our alums are, I think, more than happy to kind of be there for the current students and support them in any way that they can.
It means a lot because I feel like this conversation in itself helped me to stay resilient and helped me to keep going and stay motivated. So thank you guys.
Thank you.
Yeah,
guys.
same.
Thank you.
I really like everyone's stories about like their discovery on how they got their job and how they kept going forward. Because I mean, it's really scary, but it's nice to know it's like, even if you're not on the target that you thought you were on, it's like, if you just keep going in the same direction, like you'll get there eventually. It's kind of what it sounds. And it's nice to know.
Yeah, and you're not alone, right? You're graduating within like an incredible group of students. There's an incredible group of alumni that have graduated from City. And so I feel like for me, it's like we're in it together, and we'll get through it to the other side of it together.
Definitely.
Thank you guys so much. This has been an incredible conversation. I just want to make sure that you guys know how appreciative we are of this, and I'm sure a lot of listeners feel the same way. We'll definitely be tagging you both, Yulia and Dene, as well as linking to Dene's blog, because I think I've looked at it and it actually is pretty helpful. So I just want to wrap this up. You're welcome. And wish you guys all the best, and stay safe and stay healthy.
And stay connected if you guys need us. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye guys.